running around, being noisy while you're trying to work. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle where you have good days and you've got bad. Whatever the case, let's talk about how to make the experience better for you. So today I'm going to share my top 10 tips for making remote work actually work. So number 10, acknowledge this isn't normal. Life is not normal right now. If you're struggling to work remotely, it's important to acknowledge that these are not normal remote work conditions. Julia, who's a technical program manager at Google, tweeted this at the beginning of May. She said, "I've been working remotely for 2.5 years. The past 2.5 months have left me more exhausted than ever before." This is your reminder that you're not working remotely. You're working remotely during a global health crisis. I could not agree more. I've been working remotely for 10 years, and working remotely during quarantine has been a huge struggle for me. For the first 2 months, I had a 4-year-old who was running around, making noise and interrupting me. You know, previously before the pandemic, when I would tell people that I work from home, they would say things like, "Oh, that must be so nice that you get to spend time with your kid while you work." And I was like, "Oh, no, she goes to daycare, right? There's no way I could work effectively and watch her at the same time." And yet, many of us have been trying to do just that during quarantine, and it's been rough. Perhaps you have noisy kids or roommates or pets. Perhaps you're stressed because of financial concerns, or you're worried about the health of your friends and family, or you miss being around other people, or you're upset due to recent tragedies and racial injustice, or you're frustrated with politics. Whatever the case, life is not normal right now. So try to cut yourself some slack. I know that's definitely easier said than done, but really try to cut yourself some slack and acknowledge that if you're currently struggling with remote work, you may do better once we return to more, normal conditions, whatever that looks like. So number 9, do something else. If you're going to be on a call where you're going to struggle to pay attention and you're going to be tempted to reply to email or, get your phone out and check social media, or maybe make snarky comments with your colleagues on Slack, take your hands away from your keyboard and go do some other mindless task. For example, you could do the dishes or color or dust, do a little house cleaning. Maybe you could exercise or paint your nails. Studies show that doodling helps people retain information. I found the same to be true for really any mindless task. If I sit here in front of my computer, the temptation to multitask is too great. I'm likely to do something else that will require mental energy and prevent me from fully listening. So for those boring all hands calls or dry meetup talks where you're going to struggle to pay attention, just turn off your webcam and do something else. Number 8, eat intentionally. I have a problem of bringing a huge Costco-sized box of Cheez-Its into my office and then eating way too many of them. Also, whenever my kid snacks or my husband snacks, I want a snack. That seems fair, right? Well, the quarantine has not been kind to my waistline. So I've been trying to make an effort recently to eat intentionally. If I want a snack, I bring in a reasonably sized portion, in a bowl. I don't bring in the whole box with me. I also try to limit the number of snacks and keep them, relatively healthy. Now, I've heard from some of my colleagues, they actually have the opposite problem. They will sit at their desks and not realize they missed lunch until 2 p.m. I don't understand how this is possible, but apparently this is a real thing. So if that's you, set an alarm on your phone or block time on your calendar to eat lunch. Make sure you're taking care of yourself and eating intentionally. All right, number 7, this one's super important. Actively prevent burnout. When you work from home, it's so easy to work long hours and then never feel disconnected from your work. A study in March of last year showed that U.S. employees are working an average of 3 hours more per day during the pandemic. 3 hours. When you work remotely, you don't have that physical trigger of walking into office to know you should start working and then leaving the office to know that you should stop working. It's so easy for the lines to blur, especially when we have access to Slack and email on our phones. But here's the thing. Your employer has invested a lot of time and effort and money to make you a productive employee. They don't want you to burn out and quit. If you leave, they have to start over and train someone completely new to be productive. Additionally, if you leave, you take with you all of that team knowledge that may not actually be written down anywhere. So actively prevent burnout. Your manager probably is not going to do this for you, so you have to be very proactive. If your manager asks you to do something that will force you to work overtime, be upfront and ask them which task they want you to drop. Pick what time you typically want to start working and what time you typically want to stop working, and then stick to it. When your workday is over, turn off your computer. If you have Slack or email on your phone, turn off those notifications. Completely disconnect whenever possible so that you can return to work each day refreshed and ready to do your best work. All right, moving right along. Number 6, be productive. Yep, it's important to actually do your job, right? Slack conducted a study during the pandemic and found that how long you've been working remotely in terms of experience makes an impact on how productive you are. In fact, they found that those who were new to remote work were twice as likely to say they are less productive at home. The study also showed that a majority of experienced remote workers say they are much more productive at home. So over time, as you work remotely, you gather tools to help you be productive. So let's talk about some tools to help you be productive. First up, set daily goals. I begin every day by looking at my task list and picking out the most important 1 or 2 things that I want to get done that day. And then I do everything I can to get those done. This helps me focus on what's most important and not just what's most urgent or what's easiest. One of the most common questions I get is what tool I use to manage my task list. I use Jira, as it's what my team uses. And I put everything in there, not just what my team assigns to me. So I've got one consolidated list. I put everything from code I need to write to meetups I need to prep for, to blog posts I need to write. Everything goes in there. I also really like using Asana, and it's what I use at home with my husband to manage our family to-do list. I've heard really good things about Trello as well. So use whatever to-do list works for you. Once I decide what I need to work on, I personally have a tendency to get lost in my work. I can sit at my computer for hours without taking a break, except for maybe a quick trip to the kitchen to go pick up my box of Cheez-Its that I'm going to sit here and eat at my desk. This is not great. So I've actually set up reminders to move on my Fitbit. Every hour, my Fitbit will buzz if I haven't moved enough. This is great as it helps me stretch and clear my head. Mental breaks will help you be more productive, so take them. On the flip side, some people struggle to get work done if they don't have the accountability of someone walking by to see if they're actually working. So if you're one of those people, I recommend trying out the Pomodoro technique. It's named after the tomato-shaped kitchen timers like you see in this picture. The idea is to work in short blocks of time on a specific task, about 25 minutes, and then take a break. The great thing here is that it encourages you to avoid distractions like social media or TV or Slack messages, so you can create focused work time to get stuff done. And sometimes getting started is the hardest part, and this helps you get that motivation to get going. So if you want to Google this technique, it's called the Pomodoro technique. So to sum up, tip number 6, set goals, take mental breaks, be productive. All right, we have made it halfway through our list. Number 5, embrace the kids. Now, this is not advice I would typically give remote workers, but These are not normal times. I don't know if you guys remember this BBC interview from a couple of years ago. This guy is giving an interview on a very serious topic, and one of his kids rolls in. She's super pleased with herself. And the dad is, he's just mortified. He's pushing the kid away. And then kid number 2 literally rolls in, and dad can just not believe that this is happening. Now, here's mom. She comes in to save the day. That's what moms do, right? And she drags the kids out. And in just a moment, she is going to manage to shut the door. Now, to be honest with you, I probably would have been mortified as well. I'm a huge advocate for having childcare if you're working from home. It's really hard to be an effective parent and an effective employee at the same time. The thing is, kids are home right now, and there's very little we can do about it. I'm so impressed with the way Jimmy Fallon embraced his kids while filming The Tonight Show at the beginning of the pandemic. He knew his kids were going to be around, and he rolled with it. My husband and I have done our best to co-parent while working remotely, but it's been tough. I've been so appreciative of my manager who talks with my daughter and makes her feel special whenever he sees her on the call. My kid is much happier if she feels acknowledged. So I found that if I let her come in, say hi, wave to everybody, she's much more likely to leave and play in another room. If you're working with people who have kids at home, please be kind to the kids. The parents are struggling, and a few kind words to the kids can make everybody feel better. Also, while it may seem like parents are the least productive people on your team right now, a study from Valor showed otherwise. They surveyed people during the pandemic and found that those who were working from home with children saw a 2% productivity decrease. They found that those who were working alone without other adults or children, meaning they were isolating completely by themselves, they saw a 3% productivity decrease. And this really surprised me. I would have thought parents would be the least productive group right now. So when you're checking in on your coworkers who are parents to make sure they're doing okay, also check in on your coworkers who are isolating completely by themselves. They may be struggling even more. All right, number 4, care for yourself. This is another one that is easier said than done, especially if you're caring for others right now. But do what you can to take care of yourself. Try to exercise a bit every day. Try to eat something healthy and try to do something fun. Now, I'm an introvert, so you might think I'd be doing just fine during quarantine, but I actually have way less time now that everyone is home with me all the time. I just want some time by myself. I found that taking slow walks by myself in the evening can really help. Sometimes when I go on those walks, I'll even put my noise canceling headphones on just so I can really be alone with my thoughts. Now, my husband and I decided a few months ago that we should each take a night off from parenting. Sometimes I'll meet up with a friend for dinner at a local park. Sometimes he'll go golfing, but we each need some time away from the daily grind of parenting. So if you're feeling that way, see if you can lean on your support system. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone you can hire, but figure out how to get time to yourself. Now, I know there's not just introverts in here. We've got some extroverts as well, and I'm guessing you're also struggling. If that's you, create virtual coffee breaks or happy hours or game nights or whatever with your colleagues, your friends, your family. I know I've been playing a lot of Among Us this year, a lot of Jackbox games. Figure out how you can connect with your friends and family and make time for it. If you find that you're struggling with your mental health, I encourage you to talk with a therapist. Despite the fact that I've been working remotely for 10 years, the pandemic has hit me hard. A couple of months ago, I began meeting with a therapist for the first time in my life, and I'm really glad I did. She's helped me talk through some situations and feel like I'm regaining control of pieces of my life in a world where I've got very little control right now. So if you're struggling, know that you're not the only one. Reach out if you need help. Care for yourself. All right, number 3, take a lunch break. Now, you might be thinking, wait, Lauren already had a tip about eating intentionally. Why are we talking about food again? Yes, food is an important part of my day, but this tip is less about food and more about taking a break in the middle of your day. Every day, away from your computer. Now, as a working mom, my lunch break is one of my favorite parts of my day. It's my guilt-free time to sit quietly and enjoy watching whatever TV show I want without someone talking over it or complaining about what I'm watching. I have a weakness for bad TV and I enjoy watching it without interruption. But, that's what I like to do. Maybe you're not a TV person. Maybe you prefer to read a book or a magazine. Maybe you want to listen to a podcast, or maybe you want to go for a walk or exercise. Whatever the case, take 30 minutes in the middle of your day, step away from your computer, and do something else. I found that if I'm starting to lose focus or I'm stuck on a problem, I'll take a lunch break and return refreshed, and the answer on how to move forward on that problem will come to me. So every day, take a lunch break. All right, I have saved my most important 2 tips for last. Number 2, ask for what you want. I attended the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing a few years ago, back when we could attend conferences in person, and a moderator asked a keynote panel, if you could change one thing, what would it be? Tella Whitney's response was so simple, but it has stuck with me all these years later. She said, if I could change anything, it would be that each and every one of you would ask for what she wants. Typically, when I share this with people, I encourage them to ask for a promotion or a raise or a growth opportunity. And I still stand by that advice. But I want to really encourage you to think about what you want right now from your company, your spouse, your roommates, your kids, and then ask them for it. I've been reading a lot of articles about how to successfully work remotely with kids during quarantine. And some of the articles have suggested that you simply explain to your kids that you need focused time to work. And then supposedly the kids will allow you to work for an hour or 2 uninterrupted. That sounds amazing. And maybe that works for older kids, but I can assure you it does not work for my preschooler. So think about what your ask is, what's within that reasonable scope of possibilities, and ask for it. In my case, I told my manager I was struggling to work with my toddler at home, and I asked to take advantage of parental care leave at the beginning of the pandemic. And my management team was really supportive. The company was offering those with dependents the chance to take a couple of weeks off. And my manager offered to let me stretch out those weeks and work part-time instead. And this was a great fit for both my team and my family. We would have really struggled without this option. So perhaps you want to ask your boss for a new desk or an external monitor. Perhaps you want to ask someone if they can watch your kids so you can have a night off. Perhaps you want to ask your roommates if they can stop playing loud music at 10 p.m. so you can maintain a regular sleep schedule. It might seem scary or feel uncomfortable, but the people in your life probably don't know what you need or what you want. So ask for what you want. Now, I'm actually going to pause here, and I'm going to ask you to write down something you can ask for in the next week. And if you feel comfortable, I encourage you to share it in the chat. But either way, take a moment to write something you can ask for in the next week. So I'm going to pause. Johnny's going to ask for time off. I love that. I think sometimes we all feel like we're going to save our vacation for whenever this is over. And I don't know. We don't know when it's over. You got to take time off when you can get it. Take a break. Oh, Yelmi's going to ask for coffee break time. Love it. Play Topgolf on Half Price Tuesday. That's fun. All right, well, thank you all for sharing, and I hope the rest of you wrote something down. And feel free to keep sharing while I'm talking here. All right, I'm going to move on to number 1, my final tip for you today. Be a great PR agent for yourself. Now, I'm shamelessly borrowing this tip from a keynote that Nora Denzel gave several years ago. She encouraged us all to be great PR agents for ourselves. Your colleagues and your managers probably don't know all of the amazing things you do. So tell them. If you solve a really hard problem, tell them about it. And don't just say, well, I solved X and it was no big deal. Like, explain why it was hard or time consuming. When you're remote, people don't see what you're working on. So you have to advertise your work. If you have a daily scrum or a weekly status meeting, show up ready to tell your team what you've been working on. And be conscious of the words that you're using to talk about yourself. Control your press release. Now, I gave a conference talk a couple years ago, and a vice president from my company asked how it went. And I said, well, I got really nervous, so I started talking really fast, and then I started coughing, and I lost my train of thought. And he said, oh, I heard it went great. And I thought, here I am wrecking the press release that someone already gave about me to a vice president. What am I doing? So if you do a great job, let people know about it. And there are different ways you can do this, and it depends on your team's culture. So if someone gives me a compliment on Twitter or email, I forward that right to my management team. It's an easy way to brag without it seeming like I'm bragging, right? Somebody else is doing it for me. If someone gives you a compliment verbally, you can always ask them to email it to you or your manager. You can also create a culture of compliments on your team, right? Just be sure that your compliments are genuine, and that's going to be a win for everybody. So be a great PR agent for yourself. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 tips for making remote work actually work right now. So I'm going to recap these tips one last time. As I go through these, I encourage you to pick one tip that you can implement over the next week. And I would love for you to share it in the chat if you feel comfortable. So here we go. Number 10, acknowledge this is not normal. If you're struggling to work remotely right now, know that there are a lot of other factors at play. Remote work may not be the problem. Number 9, do something else. If you're going to struggle to pay attention during a meeting, do some other mindless task at the same time. Number 8, eat intentionally. Portion control your snacks and schedule lunch if you need to. Number 7, actively prevent burnout. Do what you can to create a consistent schedule. When you're done working, turn off your computer and your phone notifications. Number 6, be productive. So we're going to do that by setting goals, taking mental breaks, and using the Pomodoro technique to stay focused. Number 5, embrace the kids. They're around right now. Let parents know that it's okay. Number 4, care for yourself. Every day, try to exercise in some form, eat something healthy, and do something fun. Talk with someone if you're struggling. Number 3, take a lunch break. In the middle of your day, step away from your computer for 30 minutes to clear your head. Number 2, ask for what you want. People probably don't know what you want or need unless you ask. So ask. And finally, number 1, be a great PR agent for yourself. Advertise your work and be conscious of the words that you're using when you do so. So what tip are you going to try this week? I would love for you to share in the chat. Love it. I'm going to try number 4, care for yourself. That's a nice one. Ask for what you want. That's awesome. Oh, we're getting lots of them in here. Love it, love it, love it. And with that, I'm going to wish you well on your remote work journey. I hope you find, oh, sorry to bump the mic. I hope you find both happiness and success. You got this. I would love to connect with you on social. You can find me on both Twitter and TikTok with the username Lauren_Schaefer. Yes, I'm on TikTok. I joined at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's a great way to get a quick dose of humor at the end of my day. I'm also on LinkedIn as Lauren Hayward Schaefer. The slides are available. There's a link on my Twitter page, and I can drop a link in the chat in just a few minutes. I've compiled a list of references and related links if you want to dive into this topic more. So that's available at the end of this presentation. Lots of links there. If you'd like an article recap of this talk, check out this blog post I wrote. I can drop the link in a moment. I gave a talk at PyCon before the pandemic where I discussed what the research shows about the effectiveness of remote work. I walked through a framework of how to ask your boss if you can work remotely. And I shared my top 5 tips for working remotely during normal conditions. So if you're interested in those topics, check out that talk on YouTube. I think one last plug. At the end of last year, I recorded an episode of the Espacios Abiertos podcast all about remote work. In the episode, Katya asked me some great questions about how to handle different situations people are facing right now. All right, that is all I have. Pass it back to you, Ari.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate it. Again, awesome talk. I enjoyed hearing it for a second time too.
Thank you.
Really great reminders for all of us. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to impart this to us as well.
For sure, it was a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, we'll jump into our second talk, and we are going to welcome Johnny Boursiquot, and really excited to have Johnny here. He has quite the resume. I'm going to let him introduce himself more so. But one of the things I really enjoy having, especially during this time, is the people that we typically would not get to our own meetups are people that are running other meetups. And Johnny is the organizer for Baltimore Go Lang. He also, I believe, you're still on the GoBridge core team, aren't you, Johnny?
Yes, I am. Yeah,
that's awesome. And you're a speaker, you're a trainer, and just really excited to hear from you tonight. And without further ado, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to skip any long intros. I think Ari's is good enough, but if you do want to learn more about me, you can just head over to this website over there, and then that will take you to all the places, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all that other stuff. So before I get into this, I do want to say thanks to Lauren for this talk, because it is a nice list to sort of keep in mind, right? To sort of get through the remainder, hopefully the remainder of this pandemic season that we're all in. Personally, I've taken to actually going out for long walks, longer than I usually have been in the past, to sort of decompress a little bit, and I've found that to be sort of very helpful. An interesting bit to add to that is that I recently got a pretty decent camera, to take pictures with. So and I started noticing more as I went on my walks. Started taking pictures of birds, flowers, like things I previously I would never pay any attention to. I would pay these things no mind at all. But because I had this gadget now, I wanted to learn how to use it, and I started learning more about it, and then I'll go out and I'll take pictures, and now it's like the birds in my neighborhood, they're like Pokemon. I gotta catch them all right now. So I'm taking pictures of every damn bird I see. So that's really allowed me to sort of disconnect, right? And I also do whenever I get the chance, I'll maybe build something in the backyard, for the missus, like a planter or something, or I'll do some yard work or whatever the case may be. Anything really to sort of get off the screen, get off the computer. I don't know about you, but I happen to be one of those people who I love what I do. So the line between sort of work and play for me is very blurry, right? So because I can be on my computer, I could be working, but I could also be learning something, or I could be, reading a blog post or watching a YouTube video or something like that. So I can easily go from work mode, right, to play mode, for lack of a better term, without, actually having to get up and leave the device, right? So that's what I'm sort of hard change, right, from sitting down in front of the screen to actually doing something with my hands or taking a walk without any devices, obviously other than maybe the camera, is I've found that to be very helpful as well. So I'm not saying go out and buy DSLRs or whatever, but anything you can find that's going to help you sort of disconnect, really sort of not think about the things you just walked away from, on your desk. And I'd encourage you to know if that has worked for me. So thank you, Lauren, for those tips. Very, very, very welcomed. All right. So we are gonna set a timer here so I can keep track of time. I don't want to keep you longer than we have to. But today I do have what I'm hoping is going to be a fun talk for you, especially if you're still wrapping your head around Go. If you're still sort of trying to get comfortable with some of the concurrency primitives and what you can do with them. This talk is based on some hard lessons that I've learned over the years, and not necessarily Go, but really like around when you have a tool, right, that allows you to do something that you weren't able to do before, as easily as Go does for concurrency. You often sort of tend to overuse these things, right? And then you end up sort of shooting yourself in the foot, and we'll get into this a little bit as we go, but I've learned some lessons that I'm hopefully gonna teach you here. But also this talk is about sort of helping you level up in how you think about concurrency, and how you think about the resources that your programs are actually utilizing under the hood, right? So this the title of this talk, I'm still kind of messing around with it, but it's around the concept really of about unbounded concurrency, right? What happens when your concurrency sort of goes crazy and when you have no control over it? What are some things that can happen, and how do you sort of rein that in? How do you bring that back into control? How do you have more say over how you leverage your Go routines? So it's not just about launching Go routines and hundreds or thousands of them. There are implications, right, for leveraging sort of this powerful tool, and we're going to learn some of these lessons by actually building a port scanner together, right? So we're going to start very small and we're going to layer on some complexity, and as we do so, you're going to see how we can where some of the pitfalls are, right? Some of the things that can bite you, and we're also going to see how we can actually fix those things, and all using Go, all using the standard library. To do our magic, right? So before we jump into that, a lot of you, especially if you're not into security or anything like that, you may not know what a port scanner is or does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly share a screen here, and I don't tend to leverage slides that much, but I think for this one it might be useful to actually take a look at a couple of things, a graphical representation of what it is that we need to talk about. So let me put this in a window. I have to exit out of full screen. There we go. Do that. Let me close some things here. Let me share screen. And let's share this keynote doc. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Let me. Okay. Ari, let me know if you don't see anything, otherwise I will keep going. So what do we mean when we talk about a port scanner? So typically when you have client-server communication, in this case, before your client can actually start talking to a server, right, to basically make a request, and perhaps maybe you need to talk to the web server or somewhere, maybe you need to communicate to some service running on a machine somewhere. you actually need to establish a connection, right? You actually need to have a handshake with the destination, right? As a client, right? You need to actually establish that link before data can actually start being exchanged over that connection, if you will. So typically that needs to happen over a port, right? So typically when you run a service on your server, be it a database engine like MySQL, Postgres, whatever, be it a web server like Nginx or whatever, being a service that you write, right? That listens on a particular port, right? The key thing here is that you need to establish a connection on a port, right? So the operating system is going to be running a number of services, right? On basically on itself, on the host, right? There's going to be a number of different services running. And if they are willing to accept, TCP connection, right, they will expose themselves. These services will expose themselves, with a port, right? That's how the operating system is able to know. Okay, well, there's a client making a request, and it wants to talk to a particular service which happens to be running at port X. Okay, again, before that whole the data flow can start to happen, the client needs to establish a handshake with the server. So what does that handshake look like? Well, you have a client, right? And the client's going to start sending some packets, right, towards to the server. It's going to start exchanging some bits and pieces of information, right, before we can establish that connection. So the SYN is the SYN, the synchronized packet is going to be the first thing that gets sent to the server, and then the server is going to say, okay, this client is trying to initiate a connection. It has sent the synchronization packet. What am I going to do about this, right? If the server chooses to sort of respond to actually communicate with the client, it may then send an acknowledgement, basically saying, hey, I've received the synchronization packet you sent. I'm going to acknowledge by sending this SYN packet to you. And then the client then says, oh, okay, I've received that acknowledgement. Now I'm going to acknowledge that I've received the acknowledgement. It gets pretty, kind of repetitive, but you can kind of see this dance happening back and forth until finally there's a connection that's been established. Now data can be exchanged freely between the client and the server, right? So keep in mind that, we're being sort of very, this is a very sort of permissive setup here. Oftentimes, maybe you have other concerns, you have other things sitting in front of the server. Maybe there's this firewall, maybe there's some sort of a gateway that you need to get through. Maybe you can't even connect to the server to know even if it has a service running a particular port that you want. But for the sake of this talk, we're going to assume that there's nothing blocking that communication from happening between the client and the server. Okay. In some cases, right, there is, you send your SYN, and the server, if it chooses not to respond, or if it chooses not to allow for that connection to be established, may send an RST or reset back to the client, basically indicating that it has no desire or interest to actually do that communication. Again, for various reasons, perhaps it's a firewall, perhaps there's some other things preventing that connection. So that is in essence, right, what we're going to be sort of emulating here, or not emulating, but building here, because all of this sort of a communication back and forth between the client and the server, that you're actually doing that over, you're performing that communication, those requests over a particular port, right? So in other words, if your client is able to make a request or send a packet, destined for a particular port to a server, if the server says, as we saw in the previous case, if the server says, yes, I'm going to acknowledge, yes, the client acknowledges the SYN, and then that connection is established, you're basically saying that, okay, the client is not allowed to communicate at that particular port to a service running in that server, right? So when you have this dance, right, this handshake that you're trying to establish, between client and server, that is in effect, you're doing the check against a port, right? So if you extrapolate that then to sort of the whole port scanning tool that we're going to build here, the only thing we need to be able to know whether we can communicate on a port or not, right, is to be able to sort of perform this handshake, perform this dance. And if it sort of happens as we have here in the case of a successful connection, then we know that port is open. So if I have a client trying to communicate over port 80, right, to a service running in a particular server, right? Chances are it's a web server, as web servers tend to expose port 80 as one of the default ports. Sometimes it's another port, 4443, it can be another port. That web servers, if the SSL termination is happening at that level, so there's a typical set of ports that services are typically will sort of operate under, right? That you can kind of check, right? This is, hey, can I connect to port 80? Chances are there's a web server running there. Hey, can I connect to port 5432? That's typically a port associated with Postgres. Maybe there's a Postgres server running on there. So you're not really going to know for sure, right, what the service is. But for our purposes here, we don't care. As long as we can actually establish a connection between the client and the server over that particular port, we know that port is open. Okay. If for whatever reason, right, we try to perform this handshake and we either don't get a response back or we get back this reset packet, then we know that the operating system is not willing to allow our client to connect over that port to anything running on itself, right? So maybe it doesn't have a service that's bound to that port that you can hand off your request to, or what, for whatever reason, you know that you can't actually talk over that port to that server. So we're going to consider that port for all purposes closed. Okay, so basically there's two states we care about here, right? The open port, can I establish a handshake, and whether I can whether it's closed for whatever reason, right? Maybe there's an error, maybe we can't reach the server at all, maybe there's a firewall in front of it preventing the connection, or whatever the case may be. We don't really care why we can't establish a connection. We just care that we can't establish a connection. Okay, so these are the things that we're gonna worry about. So when we talk about port scanning, really basically what we're typically talking about here is basically we have a range of ports that we're gonna iterate through, right? And basically say, hey, can I connect on this port? Can I talk to something in that port? Whether it's something, whatever that service is, we don't particularly care. We just say, need to establish our connection. Is it open? Great. Then we move on to the next port, right? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about ports scanning, okay? So what we're gonna do is actually use Go to write ourselves a port scanner, right? And the beauty is we don't actually need to bring in any third-party frameworks, any tools, anything fancy. We're just gonna use a standard library. Out of the box, we have the ability to use the net package and then the dial function, which is under the hood is going to facilitate all of this connection stuff we were just talking about for you automatically, right? So you don't have to sort of do some low level, right? Sort of a packet manipulation or anything like that, right? The net.dial is sort of going to abstract at a much higher level, abstract all that stuff for you, and we're going to leverage this particular capability to basically find out if a particular port is open to the destination that we're going to be checking. Okay, so that's all the slides that I'm going to be relying on for this talk. So let me put that away. And now, my favorite bit, we actually get to get into some code. And let me move around some screens here. All right. So let's share screen. Let's go to this desktop. All right. Let's bump the size and hopefully all of y'all can see this. Okay. So I'm gonna pull up my port scan project and I'm gonna make this repository available to everybody after we're done. While I don't want you to sort of peel off and sort of go explore right away, so I'm going to wait until the end to actually share this repository. So we're going to walk through this exercise together to actually see how we put together a port scanner and increase some complexity as we do so. So let's start with the simplest thing that could possibly work. All right. So let's go with, again, I mentioned that we would use the standard library, nothing magical. The only thing we need to do here is to make use of the net packages dial function, okay? So the simplest thing that could possibly work is that, I have a very simple program here, port, basically I'm gonna query on port 5000, okay? And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use the net packages dial function, all right? Which, as you can see with the signature, there's lots of options in terms of the kind of network you want to connect to, right? TCP obviously being one of them. UDP is another kind, and so on and so forth. So there's you're able to sort of go over different kinds of networks when you actually calling the dial function. Okay. And then the other thing you're going to need is what is the address? Where am I actually connecting to when I call this dial function? And that address, right? That's what's going to contain both your host name, right, and your port, right? You need those two pieces of information in order for this to work. Okay. And remember, again, in my case here, I'm using localhost, right? But I want the port that I'm connecting to. I want that to be a bit variable, right? And as this program gets a bit more sophisticated, right, we're going to be able to sort of read that port number from external sources, and it's going to get basically more reusable, if you will. But for now, we've hard-coded port 5000, and we're going to call the dial function. So when you call the dial function, a couple of things come back, right? You're going to get a net con value, right, and possibly an error, right? So this is typical, Go idiom, a multi-value return, whereby the last bit is of type error, and if something goes wrong, the error is not going to be nil, right? Again, remember, we don't care why, right, we're getting an error, but the fact that we are considering that port closed, right, for whatever reason, okay? Now, as we go through this, and I'm going to give a quick disclaimer before we keep going on here. There's nothing stopping you from actually using this to hit hosts other than localhost, right? But if you start using the techniques and tools that I'm teaching you here today to start port scanning, other properties on the wider internet, and if somebody decides to pay you a visit at home because you've been scanning their systems for too long and too much, keep my name out your mouth. You did not learn any of this from me. Okay. All right, moving on. So what we're doing here is basically we're going to check to see if we have an error. If for whatever reason, we're going to consider this port closed, and that's what we're doing here inside of this if block. Okay. And then lastly, we're just going to close the connection. If we manage to get to line 15, right, then we know the port is open, obviously, because if we didn't, this log.fatal would actually terminate our program, with the port being closed. But if we manage to get to line 15, we just close the connection, and we just say, hey, that port, that %D, which is a representation for digit and integer, that port is open. Okay, so let's actually see this very simple program. Let's actually see our port scanner, the first iteration of our port scanner. Let's see that in action. So I'm going to do go run, and this is the simplest thing that could possibly work. I'm going to run that. Let me bump the size so you can see that a little more. And here you go. Basically, they're very, very simple. We see that 5,000, right? We consider that closed because there is nothing on my local host, right? There's no service, no application, nothing on my local host running at port 5,000, right? But I happen to know that I have Postgres running locally, okay? Now, I know Postgres, I didn't make any changes to my default port configuration. Typically, Postgres will run on port 5432. So what happens if I were to say modify this program to actually check port 5432? Now, if I run this again, there we go. Seems like my net.call succeeded, and I got back a value of type a net con, right? Therefore, I consider that handshake, right, to have succeeded, and therefore the port, I consider it to be open. Okay, so very, very simple mechanisms, very simple mechanics here for actually checking if a port is open. Okay, now that you know the basics, we've set the baseline for our functionality here. We're going to start to increase we're going to start to layer on some addition, some complexity, if you will, and make our program more useful in the process. Okay, now let me bring that down. And let me close this, and then let me now open this version. Now, we want to scan more than just one port, right? And basically, we want to iterate through a list of ports that we want to scan. And in this case here, I've hard-coded again a range of ports, basically from port 5300 to port 5500. Okay, I'm going to scan a couple of hundred ports, right? Using the same mechanism, right? Trying to establish a connection using net.dial, right, over localhost to that particular, whatever that current port that I'm happen to be iterating on, and checking to see if it's closed. If it's closed, I just continue on to the next one, right? If once I get a connection, if I can get to line 16 without actually this current iteration being skipped because it was closed, if I can get to line 16, I consider the port to be open. Okay, so very similar to what we had before, except this time we've just added a for loop in there so we can range over a series of ports, a set of ports. So let's actually run this version, and here we go. Oops, I'm missing a keyword there. We'll run. All right, so here we are. Basically, we've gone. Let me maximize this. We've ranged over a couple hundred ports from 5300, right? Sequentially going 5301, 5302, 5303, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Going through all of that, right? And for every time we fail to actually establish a connection, right? In this case, the error happened to be that the connection was refused, meaning my host, my local host basically says, hey, I'm not gonna allow this connection to succeed because there is nothing on that port running locally for you to make a connection with, right? So this is not a matter of just blocking the connection. This is a matter of having no services running locally to actually allowing the client to connect to. Except when we get to port, again, 5432, because right now I have my Postgres server running locally. So I was able to determine that port 5432 is open, but every other one of the ports, they were closed, okay? So this is not getting interesting, right? Because now I'm able to sort of feed in a range of ports and know in my entire machine, give me the list of all the ports that are open. There are actually tools, right, within our operating systems toolkit, right, that do this, right? That you can basically say, hey, scan the list of ports or tell me the ports that are open on my machine, and you'll get some nice, pretty printed output that basically tells you these are the things that are open. And here we are, we've built a very rudimentary one ourselves, okay? Pretty cool stuff, all right? So let's add on another layer of complexity. But you can kind of already see where I'm going with this, right? Because let's bring up this list again. We have here, right, this sort of sequential scan, right, of each one of these ports, right? We go basically from the 5200 all the way down to the 5300, all the way down to 5500, right? And it's actually done in sequence. You can actually see the numbers increasing one by the time, right? But this is a port scan. There's nothing really, that we depend on from one scan to the next, right? If I'm scanning to see if port 5480 is open, why do I need to wait to see if port 5481 is open, right? So this, if you're wondering, like, couldn't we add some concurrency here to basically make this, this whole process go a lot faster and maybe be more efficient, right? Like, there's nothing that says we have to go here like sequentially, right? And you'd be right. You'd be like, well, okay, great. Let's now introduce some concurrency into the mix, okay? So now our program is getting a bit more interesting. We're adding some layers of complexity. Or not complexity, but sophistication, right? The complexity comes later, all right? So now here we are, right? Again, same exact program. The only thing we've done now is actually we've added a anonymous function that we're basically going to use a Go routine, the Go keyword, to actually launch this anonymous function, right? We're going to basically feed in the port number, right? The current port number we happen to be in. We're going to feed that in, and then we're going to do the same thing we were doing before, right? But this time in a Go routine. And if you're thinking, man, this is easy, like, you're right. This is awesome, right? All you need to do to make this a concurrent program is just add a Go in front of that. Launch the work inside of a separate function, and you put it in a separate thread of execution, and boom, you're in business. Let's actually see this work. Let's actually see this in action. So let's do Go run, right? This is the sequential version. Go run me. We run that, and then done. That's interesting. Where's my output? I didn't see anything. I just jumped to this. And if you're wondering, wait, what just happened here? All right. If you're scratching your head and kind of trying to figure out, well, is there something wrong? Is my program incorrect? You'd be right in thinking that maybe you missed something, because what's happening here is that when you launch a separate thread of execution, your main thread, right, is actually still going on. right? If you are wondering what I mean by separate thread of execution, your main, right, your package main font main, that gets launched in its own Go routine. So the programs we had before that didn't have the keyword Go in there to launch separate Go routines, they themselves are in a Go routine, right? That is the main Go routine, right? So when you launch a separate thread of execution, right, using the Go keyword, right, the main thread is still going on. So basically what happens is you launch this Go routine, right? And then basically you just keep moving on. After all of after you've iterated over all of the ports that you want to scan and launching Go routines, your main thread simply goes on to line 21. It doesn't wait for any of the other Go routines that you just launched, right? So that's sort of the first lesson you kind of had to sort of take away here, is that using Go routines, using concurrency in Go, yes, it's just using the Go keyword, but then you kind of have to sort of manage, right, the communication that happens between your Go routines. You kind of have to basically force a wait here, right? You have to have your main Go routine wait for your other Go routines to finish doing their work, okay? So this is where we're going to introduce, right, some synchronization into our program, right? So we know, okay, so far that we know that we can launch Go routines. What we can't do is actually, what we need to add, right, before we sort of move on, is to actually wait for those Go routines to actually do their thing, and then before we can actually emit our output. So this program also brings in some additional sort of utility in terms of being sort of more reusable, right? So basically here I'm introducing, I'm using the flag package to allow me to sort of provide some parameters. When I actually run the program, I can provide some parameters. Says, hey, this is the post I want you to use. This is, I want you to use start at this port, and I want you to go up to that port or whatever it is. And I have some defaults, right? That way I can run the program without having to specify those things, but I have some flexibility when I'm invoking the program. That's what all this is about, okay? And then obviously, we need to parse all that before we can actually make use of it, right? And then here I'm doing some checks to make sure that the from port and the to port are actually, valid. So if you feed me, like a letter or something like that, I can't convert that to a number. Then basically I'm able to sort of tell you right away, hey, like you're giving me invalid input. Okay, so pretty straightforward. So, but here's where the interesting bits lie, right? This is where we actually need to do the synchronization bit. Okay, the sync package, right, is again part of the standard library. Offers the wait group, right, which is a capability that allows you to basically, as the name implies, force your separate threads of execution forces them to basically forces wherever you're actually making use of the wait group, it forces that main Go routine or that wherever you're actually using it from, it forces the Go routine that you're in to wait, right, for others to finish the work. So to use the wait group, really the only thing you need is to basically call on the same wait group, assign that to a variable WG as we have here. But to actually know how many things to actually wait on, right, you need to actually use the add function. Okay, what the add function does, think of it as just setting the number of things that you want to wait on. Right. Sometimes you'll see this code, an example code out there. You'll see sort of adding one at a time kind of thing. That's one way to do it. In this case here, because I know ahead of time, right, the number of ports I'm gonna scan. All I'm doing is basically taking this TP variable, which is my to port, right? This is the upper bound of my ports, subtracting the from port, which is the lower bound of my port, and that way I know how many Go routines I'm going to be waiting on. So that's what I'm doing here, right? Nothing fancy, nothing magical. Okay. And then at this point, what I'm doing here, I'm just going to iterate like from my lower bound, up to my upper bound, right? Again, doing the same thing I was doing before. Everything is pretty much exactly the same, except you'll see here on line 43, I've got this defer wg.done, right? So where the add basically increments, right, or sets the number of things you want to wait for, the wg.done, right, this done method is actually going to decrement by 1. Okay, so that means that as I'm actually iterating through this list of ports that I want to scan, and I want to basically have the scan happen in a Go routine on its own, right? I need to basically have a way of signaling that this particular go routine that I'm on right now is done, that it has no more work to do, right? So using this wg.done allows me to actually do that. So it'll decrement the wait group, right? For every time that go routine, this particular go routine that's actually doing a scan, every time it's done, it'll decrement that number for me. So at the end, right? So one of the things you must not forget, right? In order for this whole thing to come together is to actually wait, right? Using wg.wait, you actually have to wait on the rest of your go routines to actually be done, right? This is where the magic happens, basically. Your wait group, this is where you tell it, hey, I've got some go routines in play, okay? I need you to wait right here. Wait is a blocking call, right? I need you to stop this main go routine on line 54. Stop the program right here until all of my go routines have called this done, right? Every time they call it done, they decrement the counter by 1. Okay, and once the counter reaches 0, that means there are no other go routines, out and about doing their own thing. Then the wait stops blocking. Then you're able to move up to line 55, where we say we're done. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Let's actually see this in action now. Let's do a go run, and this is the third, and let's do go run me. And voila, now we're back to having output again because we were able to actually wait on our go routines. And you can actually see here, and then we had this waiting outputted. Each of one of our go routines actually did the scan on their own. And then when we're done, we just emitted the done, right? But look at the sequence here in which this scan is actually happening. It is no longer sequential, is it? Right? The first one happens to be 8087, the next one was 8090, the next one it was 8085, right? And so on and so forth. So there's no sequence to this, right? Now you know your go routines are sort of acting independently, right, and doing their thing. And who knows why, the 8087 ran before, 8082, right? We're still going to the sequence, right, from the lower bound to the upper bound, right? But we don't really care, right? Because again, remember, there is no dependency between the previous scan and the next scan, right? So in this case, we really don't care what sequence they're in. Let the Go scheduler figure out which Go routines is in the best position to actually execute right now. Let it figure out when to pause one and to give resources to another Go routine to do its thing. Let the scheduler do its thing. But for our purposes, we were able to sort of leverage the Go routines and actually be able to do what we needed to do and scan the set of ports that we needed to scan here. So before we move on to the next exercise, we need to figure out, right? We have a problem here, right? When we invoked this program, we relied on some of the defaults, right? Support 8080, I'm going to port 8090. So this is just a handful of ports, right? Just about 10 ports, just a handful of ports. So if you're thinking, oh, this is great, I can now take my tool and start going crazy with port scans and provide big ranges and everything is going to be perfect. The Go routines are great. Then you're going to be in perhaps for a nasty surprise, because at this point, this is where you're going to start crossing into a different realm of resource utilization. Here's what I mean by that. So we know we can pass in port from, or rather argument from, or flag from in to. Let's actually do that, but this time we're going to provide a much wider range of ports to actually scan. So let's run this again. And we're going to go from port, to pick some exaggerated numbers here. We're going to go from port 3000 all the way to port 65,000. Okay, so pretty big range here. But we're going to attempt to actually scan all these ports, 62,000 ports, and see how the program behaves. So let me clear the screen here. And let me actually run this. And then, oh, there we go. So let me actually stop this right here. Boom. So already here, you already see some issues here, right? You got some too many open files. So remember, every time you establish a connection, right, to a server, under the hood at the operating system level, right, there's a file handle, right? There's a socket that's enabling you to make that connection. So that basically that's in the form of a file that under the hood that the operating system is managing for you. So if the operating system, right, says, okay, any service on this host, right, they have a certain number of files that they are allowed to have open. Right? right? A certain number of file handles they can have open, right? So now it's the operating system, right, putting a constraint on your program in order to protect itself, right? So I mentioned earlier when I started to talk about some hard lessons learned that basically that sort of inspired this talk. So here's what I mean by that. I'm gonna let this program run, right? I want to see how far it gets before it just shuts down completely, or if it's gonna keep telling me that I have too many things open. So as you can see, it can actually scan some ports. Some connections are actually timing out. Sometimes it tells me that I have too many file handles open. So I know my program, although in this case it happens to succeed, I've run it in some other cases where the program panics completely because some weird race sort of conditions happen. So all I know is, as is, right, my program is not correct, right? I have to account for this sort of resource constraint that is being applied, not from within the program, not within the code, but really from without, really from where the program is actually running and what resources actually utilizing. So here's a quick story. I was working on a service, right, that was meant to communicate, right, to a remote API, right. This is very early on in my back-end development career, and I had the ability to actually use a language that supports concurrency, right. And I learned I could basically, I coded my solution, right, to be able to spin off hundreds of let's just go with Go routines, right? Hundreds of different threads, right? Go routines or hundreds of different sort of ways, right, of actually connecting to that particular resource, that remote resource, right? That this API, and actually sort of do my work that much more quickly, right? So we've probably all been, some of us have been in the situation where you're like, okay, I have to talk to this API backend. I'm gonna put this in a loop. I'm gonna be sort of hitting this API backend. Maybe I'm doing some batch processing work, and maybe they don't have a batch API I can hit. I'm just gonna be sending requests sequentially, up to this API, and then we'll see what happens. Well, I coded my solution using a mock, right, service, right, in which I could throw all kinds of concurrency at it, and it handled it like a champ. I mean, I was all localhost, right? There was no problem. It handled it like a champ, right? And then I put the solution into staging, and all of a sudden I start getting all kinds of errors. The logs are lighting up. I'm seeing all kinds of non 200 HTTP response codes. I'm like, what is going on, right? So it come to find out that the API input I was talking to, right, had some restrictions around the number of requests you can send per second, the number of requests you can send for any 1 hour period, right? I was being throttled, and I didn't even realize that, right? So I didn't know enough about the API to know that I had to account for that. But then I basically wrote my program in a vacuum, right, using a mock server, without actually knowing what the constraints that were being applied by that remote resource, right, without actually taking that into account, right? So this lesson here is about knowing, right? So Go is going to give you incredible power when it comes to concurrency, right, and what you can do with concurrency. But a lot of times Go is not your bottleneck, right? It's the resource that you're going to be interacting with that is your bottleneck. Maybe it's a database that is taking long, right, every time you run a query, right, while you have a client waiting for you to send back a response or something like that. Maybe it's the operating system in this case that is saying that, hey, your application is using up too many file handles. I'm not going to allow you to actually do that, right? So whatever the case may be, you have to actually understand what your constraints are, right, around the problem, your problem domain, the solutions that you're building, right, to actually write a program that is correct, that is gonna work well, right, and be a good citizen within that ecosystem, within that problem domain. Okay. So hopefully that all makes sense the way I've explained it. So let's go back now and see how we can actually fix this program so that we can actually stop getting this too many file handle sort of error, because we actually do want to succeed in scanning as many ports as we can without actually getting this error. Okay. So now that we know what some of our problems can be, I'm going to introduce the concept of a worker pool. Now, you might have heard about worker pools before, right? So the idea behind a worker pool is that you have a set number right, of workers, in this case, Go routines, right, that are allowed to work through your backlog of work, right? So in this case, we need to scan a number of ports, and each one of those scan jobs, right, is going to be something that the worker pool sort of picks up, right? And when it is allowed to do so, it's going to pick that up, do the work, right, and go back and pick up the next item in the list. And we're going to control, right, the how many workers are in our worker pool to be able to do this work. Okay, so we have a simple implementation here. So very quickly, you've seen this before. Basically, we have this time the flags have changed a little bit. So in this version, this iteration, I'm basically allowing you to specify a range. You can specify either a number, or you can specify sort of this mechanism, this two numbers separated by a dash. That means lower bound and upper bound. So, but again, just same basic program here. But I have a workers argument, right, that I'm going to rely on to determine the number of workers that I want to have in my worker pool. All right, so I want to constrain the number of Go routines I can have active at any one time. Okay, because this is the problem I'm trying to solve, right? Right now I have an unbounded concurrency problem. Okay, I need to solve this. I need to bound some of this concurrency, right? And I'm going to be using my workers here, right? And by default, I'm going to rely on the number of CPUs available on my machine. Okay, so but I can override that, right? So the lesson here is that a lot of times it's going to take you playing around to find that sweet spot, right? Based on the resource that you need or you are going to be interacting with. Maybe it's a database that has n number of connections available, right? That clients can have open, and you want to control, right? Sort of how long you can hang on to connections, and basically if you have if your program is short-lived, you can control how many clients you have connecting to that server. Again, these constraints are going to be they're going to be on a case-by-case basis. You kind of have to factor them and take them into account, right, in order to figure out what the right number of workers in this case, right, is for the solution that you're trying to put together, right? But there's no hard and fast rule. I happen to be using the number of CPUs available on my machine here. I happen to have a MacBook Pro. I believe it's 8 cores on this hardware. So that's going to be the number of Go routines I have sort of in my worker pool by default, right? But I'm able to sort of take in an arbitrary number to find that sweet spot. Okay, so the other thing here is that I won't bother going too much into it for the sake of time, but I have a parse to scan. That's just a utility function that allows me to just parse. So I mentioned that I could send in a number, I could send a range here. This parse scan here is defined below. I'm going to skip over going through it, but you can kind of guess what it does based on the name alone. Basically, given those values, it's going to return back basically a slice of integers representing the ports I need to scan. Okay, so past line 28, I have basically a slice of integers, right, containing the list of ports that I'm going to scan. Okay, now on line 34, this is where it starts to get interesting. Okay, in order to actually create this worker pool, I need to actually rely on the channel mechanism, right, that we have in Go, another concurrency primitive, right? So I need to use the make keyword, right, to create a channel. That is the only way you can create a channel. You have to use make. I use the make keyword saying I'm going to create a channel of integers. I'm going to send the only values I can send on this channel are integers. They must be of type integer. Okay, and so the ports scan is basically it's going to have the number, right? In this case, I'm using num workers to sort of create a buffer channel. That's going to be the number of workers I can have at any given time. That's going to be the number of work items I can have, right, to be picked up and worked on by my workers. Okay, that's my ports scan. Okay, so that's my limiting factor here, right, for the number of Go routines I can have active at any one time. Okay, and then I also have a results scan. This is the channel, right, and this one is unbuffered. Okay, this is the one that's basically I'm going to feed in results as they get done. I'm going to feed in results, the results of my scans into my results chain here. Okay, and then what I do here next is basically I iterate through basically from 0 to however many ports, however big my port chain can get, right, my capacity. I could also provide the number of workers here directly, but using cap was sometimes I've realized that not many folks who knew that you could actually call cap on a channel to actually get the capacity of a channel, and that is a thing. You can do that. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm launching a worker, right, up to the number of workers I actually want to have run. Right, so basically, in my case here, I have 8 is my default number. I'm going to launch sort of eight workers, right, to be able to sort of do some work. Okay, in my worker here, so if we jump to, so I'm making a mental note here, line 38. So if we jump to worker here, right, let's actually break this down a little bit. So the insides here should be very familiar. So everything inside, basically from line 98 to 104, should be very familiar. This is the same thing we've been doing this whole time, right? Calling net.dial. If we error, we say the port is closed. If it's not, then we know it's open. Great, right? Everything here is the same. But the only thing that's different here, let's look at the function signature first. We see that basically the worker is going to need the host, right? So it's very possible that you could scan, you could have your workers work in different hosts, right? So we're going to send in the host, right? But we're sending these two channels in here as well. So we're sending the ports channel in because this is the pool, right? This is the work pool, right? This is where our worker is going to pick up jobs from, okay? And you notice that I've made this a read-only channel, okay? You can specify the directionality of your channels only in function signatures like this, not when you declare a channel, only in function signatures like this. So our worker pool is going to get this ports channel that you can only read things from. Right, and then it's also given a results channel, which is a channel that it can only send values in. So look at the directionality, look at where the arrow, right, operator is positioned. Okay, and it's on the left side of the chain. You're reading; it's a read-only channel. When it's on the right side of the chain, then it's a send-only channel. Okay, so that means I can only send integer values on this results channel. Okay, and what I do here, I'm arranging over my channel. Another thing some may not know is that you can range over a channel, right? And it's going to pick up values from the channel as long as there are values to be picked up, right? Until something either closes the channel or the channel gets garbage collected or whatever the case may be, right? It's just going to keep on, picking up things from the channel as long as there are values, okay? And inside of here, we just quickly assemble what the address should be, a combination of the host and the port. And again, all this is very familiar by now. And then when the work is done, guess what we do? We basically send the port that is open, right? This P value. So this P value is the current port, right? And when it is open, we actually send this open port on this result chain. So imagine we're going from port 5,000 to 6,000. Remember my port 5432 is open on my machine, right? When P equals 5432 here, right? P would actually get sent over the results chain, right? So you're not sending anything back from the worker. Note that the signature of the worker here, there's no error returns, there's nothing to be returned here. Everything that you're doing is actually sending you're picking up the work to be done using this read-only channel. And when you're done with the work, you're sending the results back using this write-only channel. Okay. So if we go back to line 38 here, right, this is where we're actually launching, basically we are constraining our work. And then here, basically, we just, in a separate Go routine, we range over the ports to scan, feeding in the ports that we actually want to scan. So basically, we're gonna keep sending in, whatever range of ports that we want to send. We're gonna feed this into our ports chain, and our workers are gonna pick up, remember the full range, right? Our workers are gonna pick up whatever comes in the ports chain. They're gonna pick it up and start doing the work on it. Okay. And then at the end here, by the time we're done, we're just creating a simple slice events. Reading in or rather reading off of the results chain, any of the ports that were deemed to be open. Remember that in our worker puts the P right into the results chain. And here we're able to read off of that channel and then collect all the open ports, right? So remember, the worker only sends the open ports under the results chain. So here, what we're doing is actually we're reading off of the results chain the ports that we found out were open. Right, so just us appending to a regular slice of bits, nothing Nothing sophisticated here, right? And then at the end, basically, we just, we try to be good citizens. We close the ports, although in this case, you don't really have to, but, this is a good way of actually telling the garbage collector, hey, yes, I'm done with these channels. You can GC them whenever you want. And then we just use the sort package to sort all the integers within this open ports slice. And then we just output the results. Okay, so hopefully all that explanation was that all made sense. Let's actually see this in action and see how well that works. So let me now do a go run, and this is going to be the fourth one using a worker pool. And if I send in just one port, 5432, let's run this, and voila, right? I've got 5432. If I send in the 5,000 ports, right? So I'm going to scan from 4,000 to 9,000, right? I shouldn't get any of the errors I was seeing before around, oh, you have too many file handles open or something went wrong or whatever it is. It should handle it like a champ, right? I'm getting all my connection refused, right? As the stream goes by here, I'm not seeing any indication that something went wrong. I'm not seeing any errors around basically having any too many file handles open or anything like that. The program is not blowing up. There's no panics, right? Again, we have bounded our concurrency. We have basically set up a sandbox that basically says, hey, this is the maximum number of Go routines you can have actually running at any given time, right? And that way we don't spill over. We don't run afoul of the operating system. We don't run afoul of any sort of external resources, right? So this is a very common pattern, right, for bounding your concurrency. And program exits successfully. And again, here we have our list of ports that were open. In this case, just happens to be port 5432. Okay, let me do a quick time check here. So hopefully you're still with me, and you can see the value of these patterns, right? Hopefully you understand why, right? Using these patterns is sort of useful. Typically, when I hear folks talk about sort of worker pools or semaphores or whatever, folks tend to think it's a mechanism for speed, right? For getting a ton of things done, in a short amount of time. Not really. Sometimes maybe, but not really, right? This is about recognizing that you have what's called an embarrassingly parallel kind of problem, which is, in our case here, that is exactly what we have. We have port scans happening whereby no dependency exists between one port scan and another, right? That's what an embarrassingly parallel kind of problem, right? But really, the reason why we sort of manage our ghosts this way is that because we want to constrain them. We don't want them to run afoul and blow something up, right? We have to be sort of responsible with our use of concurrency because we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot or take down somebody else's server, especially if they don't have any throttling or any safety mechanism in place, right? You can easily take down somebody's website if they don't have any safeguards in place, okay? So be careful with that. All right. So now that we've seen this in action and we know the right way to do things, I'm going to introduce another way for you to think about managing or constraining your Go routines. And it's called a semaphore. Think of a semaphore as, remember back in the day when we all used to go to clubs and stuff? I don't know if you guys used to go to clubs, but like at a bar or whatever, right? Remember when you, or at least when you drove by, right? The certain hotspots. You'd have people like lined up outside, right? Just waiting to get in, right? That's a form of semaphore, right? Because what's happening is that inside, right, the fire marshal told the owner of this establishment that you have a maximum of say 300 people that you can have in here at any given time. Any higher, then this is a fire code violation, right? When we've heard of stories, very, very sad stories about fires happening at clubs, and because it was over capacity, people try to run out and they trample over each other. I mean, bad stuff, right? There's a reason why these constraints are in place. There's a reason why the fire marshal says, hey, you can only have n number of people in here, and you must have fire exits or whatever it is, right? These are the constraints, right, that exist, and they exist for a reason, right? They exist for safety. They exist to prevent bad things from happening, right? Same kind of concept here, right? Except thankfully here there's no lives at stake, at least not with this little port scanner we're building here. But the idea is that you are controlling at any given time the number of resources that you can have, right, in your at play at any given time. So the semaphore is, you could think of it as another kind of worker pool, right? It's a slightly different concept, right? It basically, you kind of have to play around with both of them until it clicks. There's a couple of different ways you can use a semaphore. So what I'm going to show you here is just one of the ways, and we're going to use what's called a weighted semaphore, and we're going to see this in action a little bit here. So the again, same basic concepts here. We've got the host, the ports, the number of workers, etc. And again, a little helper function here. And in here, this is where it gets interesting. What we have here is what's called a weighted semaphore. What happens is that basically what we're saying is that I'm gonna have the n number of things in this semaphore, right? Meaning that this semaphore is we're initializing our semaphore in this case, but if you go with the default, it's going to be 8 things. Basically, there's 8 slots in the semaphore, right? The moment these slots are full, right, aka the moment this club is at capacity, right, nothing else can come in. Okay, in order for one new person to go in the club, another person that's already in the club needs to vacate the club, right? So that way, n number, in order for n number to go in, the equivalent n number has to come back out, right? That's what the weighted semaphore is actually allowing us to do here, okay? So let's see how I actually use this. So what we have here is we're gonna range over our ports to scan, right? Same exact mechanism we had before, right? And then we're gonna call this acquire, right, function or method on our semaphore value here, right? So when we acquire, right, we have to specify a couple of things. One, we specify the context, and we're going to see in the next example how useful a context can be, right? And I'm going to hint at context propagation, cancellation propagations, all very good stuff that you want to factor into your code when you have client server sort of applications like this. And then the other bit you have to provide is the weight, right? The amount that you want to remove, right? You acquire from the semaphore. Think of it as basically saying, okay, in order for 2 people to go into this establishment, right, 2 people have to come out, right? So at that case, when you acquire, you'd acquire for 2, and until you're able to acquire, right, that number, right, that specific number of slots from the semaphore, this acquire call is going to block, right? That's the beauty of the semaphore. Basically, you say, hey, I'd like, so say again, to use the club as our metaphor here. Say you're with a group of friends. Say with your buddy and your girlfriend, right? There's 3 of you. And you get at the door, the bouncer says, you can't go in right now, we're at capacity. Okay, you decided you're gonna wait, right? But that if you're a good pal, if you're a good boyfriend, that if one person comes out of the club, not only you can go in the club, otherwise you're not gonna have a girlfriend and a buddy when you come back out, right? So that the 3 of you need to be able to go in there. So you basically say, hey, you know what? One person just came out, the bouncer says, one of you don't want to go in? And if you know what's good for you, you say, nope, we're going to wait until all 3 of us can go in, right? That's the acquisition that they're trying to get here. You're trying to acquire 3 slots, basically, from the semaphore. And the moment 2 more people come in, right, thereby leaving 3, right, slots that have just freed up, from the establishment, the 3 of you can now go in, right? That's the concept of the weighted semaphore, okay? So here in this case, we only care about, basically, because we have one Go routine working on 1 port at a time, we only care about acquiring just 1 slot, right? So that's why we have here this acquire. But remember, the moment we've acquired 8 slots, which is what the number of workers we have working here, right? The moment we've acquired 8 slots, all the other ports that we need to scan, we're just going to be waiting, because until basically those 8 slots, until they start freeing up by the Go routines basically saying they're done with the work, right? The Go routine basically saying, hey, I'm done with this, this spot, let me release it, right? Then no other Go routine can pick up work to actually do the port scan, okay? And this is exactly what's happening here on line 48. So again, we have a Go routine here that launches, and then we defer this sem release, right? So the Go routine basically is gonna say, hey, I'm done with my slot. One person inside the club says, you know what, I'm tired of this space, I wanna go home, right? They've released a slot. Now, somebody else who's actually outside waiting to get in can now acquire that slot and actually go in. So you see, in order for new stuff to go in, something has to come out. So it's a beautiful balance right? Between sort of the who's inside and who's outside, right? You can't have more inside than you should, right? You're able to sort of keep that safety in place by having this sort of this nice balance, right, of acquisition and release on your semaphore. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. So I'm not going to bother running this particular iteration. I'm just going to go straight to the next one, which is a more I don't want to say elegant, but an additional safety mechanism available with semaphores. Okay, and that's the use of the context. So before you saw me use the semaphore, and I mentioned you still had a context, and I mentioned we'd come back to that. The version of a semaphore that is better, right, than the existing semaphore I showed you is a semaphore with a context that you can actually do something with. Okay, so here you see on line 43, we have we again on line 21 we get our value for our semaphore. Again, same thing here. Number of workers gives us a number of slots, right? And then for line 43, we have a context that we're establishing, right, with a timeout, right? So basically, what we're looking to do here is that we're looking to say, hey, I want to. So again, using the club metaphor, if you will, if you're not hopefully you're not too tired of that yet. You can say, hey, me and my friends, right, the three of us out here, you know, freezing our butts off trying to get into this club, right? We need to we're gonna give this a shot, but we're willing to wait up to I don't know, like maybe 20 minutes, right, outside before we can get inside of this establishment. If within 20 minutes, like not enough people come out, maybe it's hopping inside, nobody wants to leave, or maybe it's too cold outside and people just want to stay in a warm environment, right? Basically, you can put yourself like a time limit. So you know what, if in 20 minutes, right, we can't go in together, right, then we're just gonna cancel, you know, trying to go to this place. Maybe we'll go to the place down the street instead. They seem to have less of a capacity issue, right? So that's the whole point around the context, basically using that to set a timeout, right, on how long you are willing to wait, how long you are willing to acquire. So again, same exact mechanism here in line 47. Basically, I'm going to acquire, right, one or more slots from the semaphore, but the context here that you're passing in, that's where the magic happens. Because remember, the context you set in line 43, in this case, you're setting that, you're establishing how long you are willing to wait, right, to acquire the semaphore. And on line 47, that's where that comes into play, right? So that's actually, again, same exact mechanism, literally same code base, same code example, with the only thing being different here is line 43, whereby we actually making use of a context, right, with a timeout. So let's actually see this in action. This is worth actually running to actually so we can see the beauty of this, how well this works. So this is 6 semaphore with timeout, and I am going to provide. I'm gonna skip the timeout for now. So I'm gonna provide. I want to scan, right, 5,000 to 7,000 ports with the default timeout value. The default timeout, if I can get back to that and show you, the default timeout value is about 5 seconds. Okay, so I'm basically saying if I can't do this port scan within 5 seconds, then I'm out of here, right? Then I don't care about this anymore, right? Like I have an SLA to meet. Like, if I can't do that, within 5 seconds, I'm out of here. So I'm gonna run this, right? And I start, doing the scan, right? So you can see I'm doing my migrations are doing their work, and then boom, our context has just canceled, right, our acquisition, and therefore we've just bailed out of this program because we don't care anymore. Because if we couldn't get it done in 5 seconds, we don't care. We're out of here, right? This is the equivalent of you saying to your friends, you know what, this place is just too busy. Let's just go down the street, right? So this is what this gives you. Now, let's say I have more patience, right? You're willing to wait 30 minutes outside, up to an hour even, and it has been known to happen, right? Then you can basically say, you know what? Let me specify a timeout, right? Maybe I'm willing to wait 120 seconds, right? And I'm willing to wait even longer. I'm willing to wait 240 seconds, right? So if we run this, right, and hopefully this scanning 2,000 ports can be done in 240 seconds here, but you can see we're already past the point where we had previously canceled, right? It was 5 seconds before. We were done a lot earlier, than that with the previous timeout, the default timeout of 5 seconds. But here we're still going, right? So this is us basically saying, hey, I'm willing to wait some more until I can get, what I'm looking for, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel this, and then now I'm actually going to share the code base with you all, and you can actually see all of the examples I've gone through. And where is my browser? I need to find my browser window. If you've got questions coming in, I wasn't paying too much attention in the chat as I was sort of rambling on. Hopefully, that all made sense as we went through everything. But let me. There it is. All right. GitHub.com. Repositories. And there you go. I'm going to put that in the chat. All right. So if you've got questions, happy to answer them. And hopefully this was a useful, nice little exploration into how to actually use those concurrency primitives and use them responsibly.
I have a question on the acquire with the context.
Yes.
In that case, I'm assuming after the timeout is reached, context will actually signal to the semaphore acquire function, like, hey, you're done. And then that'll cause it to return an error, right?
Yep, the cancellation will propagate through anything that basically, took in that context, right?
Got it.
Sort of the beauty of that the context package. A lot of the standard library uses the context package, and basically they'll listen to that done event, right?
Yeah.
To know that, okay, I need to bail out of there.
At first, I was thinking it was just going to cancel that specific acquire event and then go to the next acquire event.
Right.
But yeah, that makes sense now. Got it.
Good stuff. I think we've exhausted our time allotment, Ari. Hopefully this is a good thing, and hopefully this has been engaging for you all. If you do have additional questions or anything like that, do reach out on Twitter or any of the other mechanisms provided on.
You're more than fine with your time allotment. I mean, people are still here, so please. I think Yelmi is raising her hand, but Yelmi, you can either put it in the chat, or if you're comfortable speaking, take yourself off mute and ask Johnny a question.
Okay. First thing, what is the main difference between channel on buffer channel and normal channel? Because I noticed that you use it to limit the quantity of the listening and reading from the channel. And can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure thing. So the channels, right? The when you don't specify that number and that make statement, when you don't specify a number for that channel, you're basically creating an unbuffered channel. An unbuffered channel basically says that in order to actually pass something through that channel, right? In order to pass something through that pipe, right? When a go-to is sending something in, that's going to be a blocking operation until there's something on the other side that can pick up that value, right? That's really what unbuffered channels sort of force. They force that basically they force a blocking operation. They force wherever you're actually trying to send in that value, they will force a block there until something on the other side is able to pick up a value in order sort of to keep going. The unbuffered, or rather the buffered channel, I should say, get my wording right here. The buffered channel says, I'm going to have a buffer, right, of n number, right? Meaning that, in our case, when I was using the number of CPU on my machine, let's say 8, right? I was basically saying that, okay, my buffer channel has a buffer of size 8, meaning that, a Go routine can put, or one or more Go routines can put up to 8 values into this buffer, right? Without blocking anything, right? Without having to have something on the other side to pick up the value, right? Before something else can be put in. But the moment you reach the 9th value, right, that operation is going to block, because what happens is the channel is going to be saying, well, my buffer is full, right? You can't send anything else in until something on the other side picks up something from this channel, right? I'm full, I'm at capacity, right? So the moment a Go routine picks up a value, right, or the moment one or more Go routines pick up values from the channel, then slots start clearing up. Now, whatever was blocked, waiting to send values into the channel, now they start seeing freed up slots. Now they can start putting things in. So you can use both of these concepts, right, to sort of create these sort of mechanisms that we just talked about here. But I would say that if you are new to concurrency and Go, a lot of times, right, I would say, a lot of times you can go very, very far using the weight groups, which doesn't require the use of channels and for you to, create things like, worker pool mechanisms and semaphores and all that jazz. But you can go very, very far with the weight groups on their own before you start to need more complicated things like the worker pool pattern and pipelines and things like that, right? So, try that, see how far you can take it, and then sort of look into the other stuff. Hopefully that whole channel buffered and unbuffered stuff makes sense.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Also, Lauren is still here, I believe. If Lauren is here, and I know we didn't open it up for questions. I felt bad about that. If you have any questions for Lauren or Johnny, now's your time.
It's 9 o'clock East Coast time. I know I'm due for a refill.
Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate the both of you taking time out of your schedule to spend with us tonight. They were awesome talks and very, very, very enjoyable. So thank you for that.